Hello everyone, I'm neuralsyn, and welcome back to another episode where we're taking a look at the auto-crafting dropper functionality as part of NimBond's carpet mod. In our previous episodes, we built up contraptions for auto-crafters for the piston, TNT, and an observer. And since those videos have been posted, I've been receiving questions about how to make these things a bit more practical for your survival world. Notably, how do we turn these contraptions into something that's a bit more continuous, meaning that it produces items continuously? And how do we get items out of them without them just falling all over the floor like was illustrated in the previous videos? And so the focus of this video is really to address both of those things. And without further ado, let's get into it. So first we're going to start with the Piston Auto Crafter. This one's a pretty simple design. You hit the note block, wait a second, and out pops piston. So the goal here with trying to create a continuous contraption is that we need to power something on this block, or I think more appropriately, we need to fire some sort of block state change so that this observer picks it up and triggers the rest of the device. Now there's a lot of different ways to do this, and the normal disclaimer applies here as well. This is by no means the only way to do it, nor even necessarily the best way to do it. It's just a way to do it to illustrate the core concept. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to get rid of our input. And we need something that can be triggered repeatedly. Now, yes, the note block can be considered a block that can be triggered repeatedly, but admittedly, we also want an on-off switch for these things. So we don't want it to just continuously run over and over and over in perpetuity. So one design that I like to use involves putting a repeater here and then activating this repeater. And then to add the on-off switch, what we can do is build up a little device like this. Now we have something that is an on-off switch for our device. You can see it's off in the off state right now, so obviously when the lever is on, it's off, and the reverse is true. If you wanted to change that, you could obviously invert a redstone torch. If we turn it on, the machine fires, out pops another piston. So now the goal is to repeat that. One of the simplest ways to do that, and the way that I prefer to go about these things, is to take a look at the ingredient chain, so the components involved in populating the recipe, and then extend off of some of the later pulses. So in this case, we can see that this repeater line here, this block being powered, and then this one being powered, are ultimately the components responsible for firing the auto crafting dropper. So we need something that is observable towards the end of the process. Otherwise, if it were observed a little bit too early, we may trigger the device while it's still crafting and cause everything to break. In this case, the final step involves these observers here. So we can see that the rail will be fired once, the observer will pick that up, power this block, which will power the rail on top of it. Picking up that is this observer, which will power the note block and trigger the final craft, which is because this block gets powered. So what we can actually do is swap out this solid block for a note block, mainly because it's observable. And we will in fact observe that, build out like so. Then all we need to do is that. So what will happen here is when the note block fires and is observed by this piston, which triggers this note block, which is again how the auto crafting dropper is actually activated, we'll pick up the same signal and transmit it down here, and we'll just add a little bit of delay to that signal so that we don't inadvertently trigger this device too many times. Because this observer is powering this block, it will actually cause this piston to extend and then contract again, causing the whole system to repeat, so long as this lever is not in the on position. So we can see that. I simply turn the machine on, and out pops pistons. And to get a better look at that in action, again, this observer is picking up the final pulse. This one just is a pass-through, add a little bit of delay, and we continuously fire this piston with this little activation trigger here. And if we ever want to turn this thing off, we flip the switch. And you notice what's nice about this design and doing it in the chain-like way is that when we have turned the farm off, if there is a recipe that is actively being crafted, it will go ahead and complete. So there's always going to be a full cycle. And that's a nice advantage in a lot of cases. So simple enough here. And we're going to apply the same principle over to our observer autocrafter as well. So in this case, we have a similar setup where you hit the note block, out pops an observer. So again, we want to power this or trigger this observer by introducing some sort of black state change in front of it. So once again, we're going to swap out that, put in our repeater, put our observer in, slime block, and a lever, and done. Let's just clear out what was there before, so when we turn the machine on, see that everything fires, and out pops an observer. So once again, we have to take a look at the circuitry here to figure out where at the tail end can we take a signal from and route it back to this block here so that the whole cycle repeats. Now you might be taking a look at this rail. This rail is a bit too early. And additionally, it doesn't fire twice, and that's a prerequisite for this sort of trigger mechanism, because we need one pulse to move this down, and then another pulse in order to move it back up. So we could get one pulse from here, or we could observe this observer, or we could observe this observer, but that doesn't really get us what we want. What's best, or at least better, is that we can observe this light, which we know from just the way it's used in pulse-based designs, will in fact give us 2 pulses. And so simply enough, what we can do is in a similar way as before. We'll simply take a signal or take a reading off of that lamp. These introduce a little bit of delay just so that we're not competing with that final auto-crafting signal. Power this rail simply because this block that's sitting on is powered, which will trigger the piston, which will then extend the piston and then contract the piston every time the light turns on and off. So what does that look like? We turn the farm on. We can see that there's an observer. There's an observer. Try to look at the circuitry here. So there's one pulse coming from the lamp turning on, and then another from it turning off. We can see that the rail flashes twice, which corresponds to the piston extending the track. And again, we have the off switch, and we're guaranteed that the system will at least complete the cycle that it's on. So one of the problems that people have experienced is if you stick a hopper underneath the crafting table, intuitively you would expect that this would just pick up the item immediately. But you can see that that's not necessarily the case. In certain designs, it is, in which case there's no problem. But in a design like this, and honestly in most designs, the exit velocity of the crafted item from the crafting table is a bit non-deterministic, and so we need something to catch it. If we simply replace this into a hopper. Put back in our repeater. Now you can see when we turn on the machine. We can see that we are actually capturing the observers and filling everything up, just as you would expect. So what's happening here is, in case one of these things is locked for that temporary moment, because we do have an extra bit of delay on this final repeater, the hopper over here will snatch it up. So there are design ways around this. This particular auto crafting design does not account for hopper locking because of the block here being powered. But again, it's a simple fix. Simply add the hopper here, and you're good to go. And so it's just that simple. Again, summary, take a look at your circuitry for the auto crafting dropper. Try to pick off part of the signal towards the end of the chain and route it back to whatever start mechanism you want, and that'll create that continuous crafting cycle for you. And then with the hoppers below, you're having issues with items not being picked up by a hopper directly underneath, simply throw one to the side and you should be good to go as well. So that's actually going to do it for this episode. It's a short one, but hopefully that answers some of the questions that have been coming in. If you have ideas for future episodes, please let me know. I appreciate all the support. Give me a like, subscribe, give me some ideas, and I'll see you next time. Bye.